There we go.
Thank you, Lady, for announcing that. Thank you all for coming today. Really much looking forward to the session today. It's our first panel event on transformation in legal, and we're going to be talking everything legal and IT. So that is the role of IT, adoption of technology, and we'll also be looking at some of the key challenges and opportunities that lie ahead as well. For those of you that don't know me, I am Esther McMorris. I am the Chief Executive and founder of 9 Feet Tall, and we've been delivering complex change within the legal sector for 15, 16 years and still counting. Really delighted to be joined by our amazing panel today. So we've got David Aird from DAC Beachcroft, we've got Andrew Brammer from Allen Overy, we've got Nathan Hayes from, I have to think about that, Osborne Clarke, I do remember, and Tiggy Robinson, who's a partner at 9 Feet Tall, and also heavily involved in change within the legal sector. Before we kick off, there's a couple of housekeeping items. So for all of you that are on, if you could make sure that you are on mute. I already see there's lots of chatter going on the chat. If you have any questions as we go through and any specific questions for the panel, if you could use at the bottom of your screen, there's a Q&A button. So those questions will come directly to the panel. So it's easier for us to pick that up. So as we go through, please pop them in there. If we don't get a chance to answer your question, but it is a good question, what we'll do, we follow up with the panelists at the end and get back to you and follow up with a written response or a verbal response, but we'll hope to get through as many as we can. I think, as Tiggy mentioned, we are also recording this session, so please be aware of that. So let's get cracking on. So I thought it'd be useful just to do a quick intro around the room. David, did you want to just kick off and introduce yourself, and we'll introduce all the other panelists as well.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Looking forward to this. IT and legal. What could be more exciting in our lunchtime? David Aird, IT Director at DAC Beachcroft. So we're an international firm, 3,000 colleagues, mostly in the UK, and then a smattering international between Singapore and Santiago. Happy Pride Month, everyone. And I would just say I'm actually in our office in Bristol today. So I've asked everyone to be as quiet as church mice, but let's see. So I will probably mute myself in between. So do shout, you're on mute, which is obviously the call for the last 12 months. So I will go back on mute.
Fine. Thank you, David. We'll see some heads popping behind you, so we'll give them a wave. Andrew, could you introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi. It's nice to be with you today. I'm Andrew Brammer. I'm the Technology and Shared Services Director for Allen & Overy, global law firm across 43 offices around the world. So looking forward to the conversation today. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. Nathan, over to you.
Hi, yeah, so Nathan Hayes, IT Director at Osborne Clarke. We're an organisation of 2,000 people across primarily Europe, UK, but with representation in Asia and in North America. I'm very much looking forward to this discussion. I've been working at OC for almost a quarter of a century and I've seen a lot of change over that time, but I'm only expecting that change to increase in pace over the next, well, hopefully not another quarter of the century.
There you go. Perfect. Thank you, Nathan. And last but not least, Tiggy.
Hi there, I'm Tiggy Robinson, partner at 9 Feet Tall, so working with Esther and our team, and we're a consultancy, so we have offices in Bath, London and Manchester, and in my role I head up the legal sector team, so we work with law firms and in-house teams to help them deliver change, so that can be sort of technical projects or people related and ways of working projects. So I know the panelists, and yeah, they've had many conversations with me over the years about how to do things well and how to get change to stick.
Perfect, thank you. Okay, well, let's get cracking. And I think one of the key areas we could start with perhaps is looking at the IT function and also how that has changed over the years. And maybe Andrew, we can start with you and give us some insight. How do you feel the scope and the boundaries of IT have changed?
I mean, there's no doubt about it. Over the last number of years, the scope and the boundaries of the function have changed quite significantly. And I think that's principally driven because technology has moved from being a utility to one where it's now much more of a strategic enabler in the legal industry. If you look at what's happening within A&O, for example, over the last 3 years, we've significantly increased our legal technology capability. That now includes a technology incubator, a dedicated team. And the work there that we're doing in terms of how those boundaries have expanded, one is about the pervasive adoption of new technologies into the running of our practice groups. So how do we take something that's new in the market and then deploy it at scale so we reap the benefit and our clients reap the benefit? And then the other area of focus that we've had, which again has sort of taken us into new markets, is building large-scale client solutions. And the landscape as we see it at the moment is predominantly niche products addressing very deeply specialist areas. And what we've been doing is linking those together in end-to-end solutions for clients, which opens up new revenue streams for us. So that's in the front office, how the boundary and the scope of the IT function has changed. And then I think in the back office, which is all about the smooth operation of the business, I think, topically right now, it's, how does technology enable hybrid working? There are tens to hundreds of millions of pounds of real estate savings and talent retention agendas to be supported. So how do we create a compelling office experience? How do we allow people to work securely from home? And then I think the other area where we're also integral to a much greater extent than we have been in the past is the management of risk around data compliance, because that's just become a really hot topic over the last number of years. That's driven by governments, passing new legislation, regulatory changes, and then particularly by our clients as well. And all of those things have had a kernel of activity in the past. Now, they're really expansive, particularly for us. So that would be, for me, a start of attempt to say how the boundaries changed at A&O over the last 3 to 4 years.
Yeah, and David, maybe kind of just recapping that, so there's a kind of the client-facing client solutions back office, clearly the risk and data compliance, which we see with a lot of our clients. Does that ring true for DAC Beachcroft? Is there any other areas of focus?
I think I'd also, and I know where Andrew's coming from, but I'd almost twist on the head the utility point. I think IT has become more of a utility, and I get where he was coming from, but everything is now as a service, and anyone can go on a website to buy something in IT these days. So clients and markets were buying things, the HR team are buying their own thing. So I think for many years we in IT sometimes have battled against that. I think we are certainly, and I think most IT departments now are beginning to see themselves as experts that can, consultants if you like, internally, to help these teams work with them to do that. For many years for us in DCB, we were dragging the business towards the future. Then they started to get interested, which was great. And now probably in the last 12 months, and I'm sure we'll touch on it later with COVID, they're almost bringing solutions to us, which is the usual. We've always prayed for that, manna from heaven to come, and now it's beginning to come. So we're all scrambling to keep up. So I think it has changed very much from us controlling everything to us actually letting innovation and letting, we'll talk about that later, giving things a little bit more oxygen and breath, but still being the experts to secure it, to watch the data, as Andrew said, and things, but to allow just, the barriers to go down just a little bit.
Yeah, and it's interesting as well, I think, with kind of digital transformation in particular on the agenda, there is definitely a role that the business plays in driving that digital transformation, but there's also a really key role that IT plays. And I don't know, Nathan, can you perhaps expand a bit more on how that's done at Osborne Clarke and how you manage that kind of split between the business and the IT's role in digital transformation?
Sure, and I think to David's point, we've seen over the last, especially the last 15 months or so, the business has changed in terms of it, or our businesses have changed in terms of their approach to digitalization, and we are less of our time is spent on dragging the business kicking and screaming into the future, and is much more to do with actually partnering with, consulting with the rest of the business in terms of providing them with guidance around how to deliver this digitalization well, because that interest has been stimulated, but the need to stimulate that interest and stimulate that change is still there. That hasn't gone, because law firms are relatively unique in the way in which they operate. In terms of that focus on billable time, we did a survey recently where we asked our business just what are the barriers to this digitalization, what are the barriers to change, and time is a significant factor, and because of that, we still have a role to play in terms of signposting opportunities, in terms of guiding people and in terms of showing them the art of the possible, how they could operate. You know, so that's still, I think, a key focus for us. But I think we're much less focused on that in terms of the general plumbing of the business, and it's much more, that sort of work is much more focused on in terms of the way in which we go about delivering legal services, which is a real value add. You know, a lot of time in the past has been spent on working with, you know, back office teams in terms of improving back office processes, and that's got some value, but nowhere near as much value as actually transforming the way in which we deliver legal services.
Yeah, okay. And Tiggy, maybe add to that, because I know you work across multiple law firms. On that digital versus business, how are organizations or how are firms finding the right balance so that there's enough support and enablement, but it's not, chaos doesn't rule? Have you found a magic ingredient in that?
I think it's a bit of a journey engaging with the business. So when I first started working with law firms, I think it wasn't fully mature. So there was engagement with the business, but it was a sort of, it was done during business planning. So trying to work out what was going to come down the pipe in the next year or the next 2 years. And I think that is changing, and there's much more of an emphasis on having constant conversations and partnering properly, like you would in the HR business partner sense. So I'm seeing that a lot more, and I think that's a really positive step, because actually what you want is for, as David was saying, that this sort of consultative relationship to develop, where you have these conversations, and some of the solutions that are coming from the business or the requests might not fit in with the sort of architecture map that you've got planned, but actually you want to know what those needs and those desires are, so that you can find a way to work together to achieve something, rather than being the monitor that has to shut down shadow IT all the time. So I think it's definitely going in the right direction, but it's about having the people to have those conversations and baking those into your structures, into your teams, because it's not a once a year conversation, is it? It's a conversation that should carry on throughout your business planning cycle into your delivery cycle. So I think it's moving in the right direction, but there's probably more work to do.
Collaboration is key, that's what we say. So perfect, thank you for that, Tiggy. The other area I'll be really interested in, and David, I'm going to pick on you for this particular one, is just around the nature of the project, and in particular the technology. So I think when we started 16 years ago, it was all around legal tech. That was kind of the one thing that needed to happen. And now clearly there's other collaboration, digital transformation. How are you finding that balance, and how are you managing that balance?
Yeah, I think, I mean, I've been here for 7 years, and this is my first law firm, and I think both Andrew and Nathan have been in legal a lot longer than me, and obviously you and Tiggy have got a strong pedigree. I was quite surprised to get into legal. You know, to me, a business is a business. You know, legal is quite different, and that's something I learned in the first few years. Lots of different suppliers, lots of different products, quite fragmented, you know, with regards to the size of the companies, the size of the suppliers. And I think I'm quite glad to see a sort of adrift at the moment, not so much a drift, but maybe a change in strategy from a lot of the law firms that are saying, right, fine, we've got these, let's have specialist legal tools where we need them, but let's actually adopt the Microsoft or whatever it is, you know, the other tools that other companies are making great use of. And of course, we're all licensed for these tools, so why wouldn't we make best use of it? And I think that's always been a challenge in law firms, is to use what we've got. You know, every day someone asks us for something, but we've had for 5 years. So there is something about collaboration and communication, but it's using the tools we've got. And most of the firms have these Microsoft licenses and other standard tools. Do we need a legal XYZ system, or do we just need an XYZ system? You know, and absolutely for certain processes we do, time management probably, finance, etc. But shouldn't we be just using more sort of vanilla, you know, easier to acquire the skills, easier to look after, you know, etc. So that's certainly our strategy, and I think where a lot of law firms are going these days.
Yeah, and Andrew, Alan Overy, have you got a kind of a similar tussle between kind of specific legal tech versus kind of other tech, and how are you managing that?
Yeah, and we sort of differentiate, I suppose, a bit between sort of legal tech for us is the solutions that we're using to help our lawyers serve their clients in the augmentation of working practices. I agree with the points that David has made. I think the legal industry is relatively poorly served from the suppliers, the technology suppliers that it has, that solve the specific legal problems. I think increasingly we'll do much better to leverage, the mainstream technology providers. I think it will allow us, greater simplification in our technology estate. I think actually the stuff will work better and will be more reliable as well, and easier to integrate, which I think is another sort of crucial area when it comes to sort of user experience. So yeah, I would echo the points that David has made. But for us at Allen & Overy, our main emphasis at the moment is tools into the hands of lawyers to help with the servicing of clients.
Okay. And if we're actually one before we go on to the next one, just there's a couple of questions trickling in, so feel free, do feed them in. So any good questions or any key questions that are for those people who are attending, do feed them in, so there is an opportunity to ask those as well. And one of the questions we've got here, and I'm going to pose it to all of you, but I'm going to start with Nathan, is if you're looking at kind of tech and your role, what's been your biggest win over the last 12 months?
Oh, that's easy, Teams. But in a number of different ways. So, right at the beginning of the pandemic, we had this, obviously we had a need to communicate. And so we at Osborne Clarke were actually in a sort of hybrid environment between Teams and Skype. And within very short order, like every other business, we transitioned to a full conferencing service. In our case, we're using Teams. Other people use Zoom, as we are today. So that's and seeing the adoption of that technology and the speed with which people got used to it and comfortable with it, that just demonstrated, certainly to me, and has been incredibly helpful, just how capable our people can be when they need to be. And that, I think that just burst quite a few sort of preconceptions as to what actually is possible. But what it's also done is it's provided a sort of pathway in terms of to the other aspects of Teams around collaboration, which has allowed us to really sort of fast track some of our digitalization work and leveraging the other components. So to the point earlier that David and Andrew made around focusing on utilizing the enterprise tools that we all have, rather than those tools that have been designed specifically for law firms. That's a big problem for us. We're highly regulated, and as a result, the barriers to adopting new technologies is quite great. So having these vast armies of different vendors is a very expensive proposition for us. Now, the consolidation in the market is really helping in that regard, as more and more firms consolidate, legal suppliers consolidate. That does help, and the likes of Rain and Court, who've effectively a sort of legal tech app platform, for want of a better term, that's also helping. But ultimately leveraging enterprise grade tools, which frankly our clients are fully used to now, and are leveraging more themselves. So we're sort of playing to the, preaching to the gallery there. So it really helps by leveraging those tools in terms of our clients being comfortable with them.
Yeah, and it's interesting that the COVID burning platform of doing it has, and I think many people say they've delivered 5 years of change in the space of 5 months, and it's that burning platform that helps, but it's now that confidence that actually it's showing that IT and tech can be implemented quickly and can be adopted quickly. So that's hopefully something that we can build on. David, is there any particular wins that you like to share, or anything, or is it Teams as well?
No, not Teams for us, but similar sort of themes. So I think, roll on Friday, so the legal rag no one admits to reading. So we were runner-up.
We all do.
Exactly. we were runner-up for team for Firm of the Year, and we're also runner-up for how best we dealt with COVID and the whole thing to that. So I think that those were the outcomes of what we've been doing in the business. So, and IT, obviously, with regards to COVID, were at the heart of that, and not alone HR and everyone else as well. But I think, and we came from quite low down, the Firm of the Year charts. So that's been an amazing turnaround for us. And I think how we've coped as a business in the last 12 months, including IT at the heart of it, the things we do now, we've done a whole PC rollout remotely, delivering upgrades remotely to, Windows 10 and full applications. And we just went live with our new 3E system in Azure on the 1st of June, to time and to budget, you know, so
there we go.
all in a pandemic, you know, so
Take
it's,
that.
you know, exactly. So it's just sort of extraordinary. But again, like everyone else, the tale is, you know, through this, we've managed to do all this change. So
yeah, it's amazing what resilience and drive people have shown. Similar to you, Andrew, is there any particular highlights that you'd like to share?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, like everybody, I think the fact that we're all sitting here going, yeah, we've had a good year, that's good. You know, we've got the firm out, worked successfully remotely for, you know, 15 months now, would be the, you know, the biggest win. And within that, there are a bunch of other initiatives that have gone on. I think, you know, one of the things that we're now looking at, you know, because obviously we, you know, like a lot of organizations in every sector, we crashed an awful lot of stuff in there in order to make that happen. It's now looking at how we can sustainably leverage that, because obviously the reason we did it quickly is we didn't do a lot of the other things that we would normally do in relation to working practice, risk management, other bits and pieces. And so how do you sort of look at what you've done and go, right, how do I build on that sustainably over the next period of time? But definitely just having Alan and Overy work successfully from home for 12, 15 months, that would be a good win, I think.
Good achievement, and yeah, hopefully it will, some of that will stick as well. And Tiggy, how have you found, because clearly some of the work we did 2 years ago versus the kind of roller coaster of last year, what's kind of been your highlights that you've seen within the legal sector that's really changed?
I think use of collaboration tools is brilliant, because actually it's just knocked down so many barriers that were there before. So teams being able to collaborate, and I'm sure that there is something that you lose when you're sitting on a screen all day. There absolutely is, but it also opens up so many opportunities to talk to, meet people that you would have had to travel miles and spend a lot of time traveling to. So I think adoption of collaboration tools, not just Teams. I mean, I did quite a lot of work around innovation and idea generation. Tools like Miro, just for doing workshops, things like that. They really open up the opportunity to gather people from, you know, when you're in a global firm, to gather people together and actually get them talking and exploring ideas. So I think for me, that's a massive win, is just showing that you can still deliver great projects and you can still generate ideas and have really meaningful, insightful conversations when you're not in the same room. That, to me, that's a massive win. And hopefully that's something that we keep doing and we don't just revert back to type of having to get everyone in a room every time we want to, you know, discuss something or come up with some new ideas.
Yeah, and I think if even I look back at the workshops that we facilitated right at the start versus the ones you're doing now, it is a different ball game, and it is trying to get that face-to-face interaction while still working remotely, and you know, it can be achieved, and the results you can get them remotely. So excellent, that's good to see. And I guess really off the back of this, what we're hearing, and if you look in the media and the press, I think, and in particular within legal, innovation is the word that everyone talks about. And you know, I guess there's different ways of interpreting innovation. So clearly a lot of things have happened. David, maybe, I don't know if you've got a view on it. How do you see kind of innovation, and how do you see that within the legal sector?
So I'm a bit controversial on this. Every time I hear it, I want to shoot myself. So I just think it's one of these words that is so overused. I much prefer to talk about, you know, change and just, you know, incremental change. You know, it's a bit trite, but I love the whole, you know, let's make tomorrow just slightly better than today. You know, all these sportsmen and athletes that talk about 1% improvements. And our FD at our global partners conferences used to talk about 1% change to revenue or to this or that, and it had massive effect on profitability and things. So these, you know, in billing and getting the cash in and all the rest of it. So I think that's what I'm more interested in, you know, and change. Don't get me wrong, if you can come with that, you know, this was the situation, then we did this and we've made this amazing result. And we've done a few of these programs with you guys. And that's where I think you guys have been brilliant helping us as in the business change aspect of it, and actually driving. Tiggy did some great work with us on our previous IT strategy that's informing the new IT strategy on holding us to account on what actually are the outputs from it. Because you can do lots of change and lots of innovation, but what actually are you getting from it other than a nice press release? So I'm really into, we did this, we're more efficient, there's less touch points, the customer service and satisfaction is up, rather than just we used AI and automation, you know, let's write a press release, let's mention AI 3 times and automation twice. No one talks about customer service or, this, that, the next thing. The outputs that are actually important to people and to clients.
Yeah.
So hate it / love it. So it's one of those.
I like it. It's refreshing to hear, and I very much go with you on the outputs as well, because ultimately that's what you do it for. Any of the other panelists like to contribute on the topic of innovation and their views? Maybe contradict what David's saying.
Well, unfortunately, I won't contradict him. I'll support him, because I totally agree. And when we talk about this new idea of innovation, what the hell do you think we've been doing for the last 25 years? So we didn't go from pen and paper to where we are now purely through without having some degree of change and innovation. So I agree. I think that we're talking about an increased pace, and truly, what is innovation? I think 95% of what I see in terms of change within the legal market and the way in which legal services are delivered aren't innovation. They're just incremental improvements. But there is a place for innovation. There is a place for bringing entirely new services to the market, and there's a few examples out there. But the vast majority of what law firms are doing are incremental change, because they're not completely flipping their business models on its head, which is what you need to do if you're talking about true innovation. But there is enormous value, and I think that's the trouble, is that we've been distracted by that, because there's actually enormous value to do with just improving the way in which we go about delivering legal services. And the great opportunity we have now is that we have seen a sea change. We have seen a change in our law firms, in our lawyers, where they are starting to recognize that technology has a material part to play in the way in which they go about their work, and much more so than what I've seen technology do in the past, and this is to do with legal tech especially, is the analogy I use is like buying this sort of really bizarre and weird kitchen utensils, where you sort of, well, I'm going to use that in a very small percentage of cases. And actually, when you're talking about trying to improve the quality of the food you produce, that should be about improving your ability as a chef, improving your understanding of your ingredients and the way in which you combine them, not buying this new whizzy gadget which sits in the corner and only came out when you bought it and basically stays in the cupboard forevermore. And that's the change I think we've got to see, is we really should be focusing on introducing the concept of project management to the delivery of our matters. That sort of stuff is the real where the value comes in, and then the technology to support that, absolutely. But that's what we should be focusing on as IT departments. So I had a strategy meeting with our managing partner and the rest of my senior management team a couple of weeks ago. I said, okay, well, right at the end of the meeting, just give us the top 10, 5, or even 3 things you'd like us to achieve as an IT team. And he said, there's only one: change the way in which our lawyers think. And so that gives you an indication of the ambition that our IT functions should be operating within our law firms.
Yeah, interesting. I love your kitchen analogy. I'm sure I'm the one that has a cupboard full of tools as well that never get used.
I'm heading home for my bread maker, my toasty machine, and my juicer as we speak. Can I jump in to make a tiny wee point, actually? Which is just, I agree with everything Nathan says, but there's one thing interesting that Andrew said earlier, which was augmentation. I really like that word, because all this hype about AI and everything else, and lawyers will be gone tomorrow. I personally don't subscribe to that. These are augmentation tools that will help the life of the client and the life of the lawyer and all the rest of it. Certainly today, in the here and now, that's what they are to me. They're augmentation. So that's a word I really like when we talk about innovation. But sorry, Andrew, by all means, you jump in.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with the points that are raised. I mean, I would make a distinction between those 1% gains are crucially important, and that's how you make a huge amount of money. And I agree, drive up massive amounts of profitability. But there are events that occur where you are able to make a shift, and I think those things do happen, from time to time in the legal industry. They do happen from time to time in our firm. We see, changes where something that took 48 hours takes a couple of minutes. We see changes where actually we license software to create annuity-based revenue streams as opposed to billing for time. Now, they're not commonplace, but they do happen. And I think, to come back to both points that David and Nathan have, made earlier in the session, those changes are lawyer-led. And if you've got the right forums to have the conversations with the right people, and you can bring them together with, technologists who are able to translate, the business idea into something that actually works, then I think interesting stuff, can and does happen. But I also completely agree that the whole thing is completely overhyped. as well. It's been coined by the marketing teams of every technology firm under the sun, and we have to live in that world. But, yeah, those would be my thoughts.
That's it. Hashtag innovation. That's what it is.
Indeed, yeah.
Tiggy, do you have a view on innovation, or whatever you'd like to call it, augmentation or continual change and improvement, and perhaps share some insight as to where and how it's working well? And I know we've already talked about clearly it being lawyer-led and changing that mindset. Are there any other elements that would contribute to that?
I think it is really important for it to be lawyer-led, but I think you have to open people's eyes up to what's possible as well. So the things where I've seen it work really well is to give people tools to understand, or training to understand, okay, well, what are the different schools of thinking around service design or design thinking, or getting, leaning out processes, and also what is the technology that's out there, and what happens in different sectors, not just in legal. So giving people that kind of background and that information, and then also really pushing the client focus, because a lot of what I see when I work with teams that looking at innovations is that they've asked everybody in the organization come and tell us your innovative idea, and then they get swamped with 20,000 ideas about having dress down Friday or bringing fruit to the office, and they haven't been specific about the type of changes that they want to see, but also getting focus on, well, how does this affect the client? What's the experience like for the client? And I think firms that are pushing that agenda are making bigger strides than those that are focusing more on internal processes.
Yeah, no, and I think that makes sense. I think that whole client understanding and client listening, and it links back into delivering value to customers and to clients. So if that links into whatever we branded, whether it's hashtag innovation or something else, that's clearly fundamental to that, along with that lawyer input and drive and support as well. I'm going to stick with you, Tiggy. I'd like to talk a bit more about the adoption of technology and ways of working. And I think we've already talked about that. We've seen a shift that decision making has been much quicker. There's a rapid adoption of technology, and now with people going back into the workplace, and I don't know, there's some reports saying, can we continue at this level of pace, or within 6 months are we back to where we were 2 or 3 years ago? And I don't know whether you've got a feel for what's happening there.
I think adoption of technology is I spend a lot of time talking with teams about how to get better adoption levels. So new tools go in all the time, but actually what I see a lot is that there's such a pressure to deliver projects, so to deliver technology projects, that there isn't the capacity once a project's gone in, once tools live, to actually maintain and stay in that place to embed it properly before moving on to the next project, because there's so many things that need to be done. So the thing that I think is really critical is making sure that actually people understand not only how to use technology, so doing technical training, but they understand how that fits into their role and what changes have, what effect that has had on their role. So should they be spending less time doing something or more time doing something, and that training and that engagement continues for longer than a week after the new tech is launched. And I think in terms of reverting back to old behavior, we're all creatures of habit. So we all say, oh my goodness, I'm never going to go back to working 5 days in the office. And we said that a year ago. Latest surveys say a lot of people will start returning to 4 days a week in the office, because actually we are creatures of habit. And I think same thing with technology. You have to use something every day for a month for it to become a habit, and then keep on using it. So I think with these tools, if people aren't using them every day, it's going to take a long time to get good levels of adoption. And I think IT training teams need to think about how do they make that, how do you make those sorts of that training available and available on demand, because people need to keep having that immersion, that experience, and not just have a one-time training solution. So
Okay.
my soapbox.
That's good. I like it. If we look at Osborne, Clarke, Nathan, have you seen any challenges in adoption? And I think what Tiggy is saying also, that kind of continual use, so not just going live with new tech, but actually then continue to use it. Have you seen any challenges along the way?
Oh, absolutely. All the time in terms of, getting people to adopt technology, getting people to, once they've adopted, to continue using it. There's a number of factors here. Well, first of all, you need to understand the community you're delivering this technology into, and it's not just a team; it's a group of people that are engaging with that technology, and that can be within the business and without. So, you've got to ensure that you're bringing the entire team along with you, so that you achieve critical mass. You have something that's self-sustaining, and if you don't achieve that, it's going to fall flat. That's absolutely the case. But that's sort of around traditional introduction of new services. We've got an entirely new world now, because as we move to cloud services, we don't have the control that we used to have about when new features and new functionality are being introduced. So as a result, we've had to flip our model. We've actually introduced the concept of tech leads within the business, not just around providing that center of excellence in terms of that technology, but actually getting on the front foot with it, to be monitoring the roadmaps of those technologies, to then engage with relevant other parties where they identify that the change is coming down the line, that we then need to go to the business, either to make them aware of the change and train them and all that sort of good stuff, or much wider conversation to say that this opens up all sorts of other opportunities. And that's not a very comfortable kind of role for technologists to take on, but it's something that they're going to have to, that they are, certainly within our organization, having to learn a whole set of new skills around operating in that way. The other thing I would say is that, and this goes back to where at the start of the discussion, the whole concept of how do we engage with our business generally. And so we've set up a consulting team because we recognized, to Tiggy's point, that you have to have an ongoing conversation with business. We need to understand what the needs are, what the opportunities are. We need to connect the requirements with a whole tool set to ensure that we are actually deploying the technologies that we need to actually achieve the outcomes that our lawyers need to achieve. So, having created that consulting group, that's the mechanism that we're using to influence and to help support the change within the business.
Thank you. And that's really interesting, both the technical leads and that consulting team to really collaborate. Is that something similar that you're doing at Overy, Andrew, or how are you tackling that issue of continual adoption and making sure that people are using the tools that are available?
Yeah, it's we have a similar concept at ANO with this idea of sort of technology relationship management. I agree on the training point, and we, as through COVID, have flipped our training model, and training materials for the core products that people use are now available 24/7 on a self-service basis, and during the week, it's rolling in person, so you can just dip in and out of courses being given by trainers. Alongside that, so that's sort of teaching you how to use the product as it stands, but I think more importantly, it's what are the associated working practices that go with that product, and if you're not teaching those, then you're really going to come unstuck dreadfully quickly, particularly with the scrutiny that the management of data, the management of information barriers, and client obligations on the way certain tools can and cannot be used come into play very quickly and very hard as well. So making sure that you're not only teaching the product, but you're teaching how the product can safely be used and efficiently used within your particular practice group. You have to, for our experience, you have to put those things in a twin track. You can't do one and then do the other afterwards. Otherwise, you've got to kind of work out how you get back to a good place again.
Yeah, and I guess it's similar to what you were saying as well. It's managing the technology and the working practices and the compliance that sits around it as one package. Are you on the things that you make available? Are you finding that your teams are using that? Is there kind of good positive feedback, or is it quite a push to get people to come and learn more?
A while ago, it would have been a real push to get people come to training courses. Now, when we look at the stats, we're running thousands of classes a month. You know, from around the world, people are wanting to come in because they need to know this stuff in order to be successful in the roles that they're performing. So there's definitely been, and I think, you know, that's been one of the good things that's come out of the COVID crisis, is that people are much more self-sufficient and much more engaged in terms of, they recognize the need to use the technology to do their job. They recognize where there are gaps, and they're getting on and getting those gaps, addressed. But, you know, I think it comes all the way back to the point that Tiggy was making, which is, you know, why do you put these tools out there in the first place? You don't put them out there because you've got an enterprise license. You put them out there because you've got a business purpose or a business problem that you're trying to solve, or you see friction that you're trying to remove. And that has a direct linkage to the working practices that go with that particular pain point that you're trying to address.
Yeah.
Sorry, Esha, can I just jump in? The other thing that I've noticed is it's not always just about new technology either. So skills demand is changing. So people might be amazing in face-to-face meetings, but actually when you get them on Zoom, they become some kind of robot. And so the type of training that's required, it's not just using a tool, is it? It's social skills, it's business skills, it's not just tech skills. And I suppose where does the boundary sit between what IT provides in terms of training and what is provided by other, you know, business support teams? So I think it's quite interesting, because eventually you want to be able to offer something that's really joined up, and it could be tech, or it could be, you know, some kind of social skills, it could be business skills, but everything is available in one place. And I think that's a real challenge, because traditionally it hasn't been. It's been very much, this is this function and this is
yeah,
that.
I agree. The intersection of something like effective meetings with IT has always been, you know, that's not been a Venn diagram that's necessarily met that well in the past. I think the other thing as well is, you know, we've sort of had quite a sort of a team specific conversation, but, you know, there's, you know, in different parts of the world, there are different prevalent technologies, and it's recognizing that, you know, clients' norms also intersect with, you know, what it is that we want to achieve as well. And you've got to be nimble enough to go, you know, actually in the US, there's an awful lot of telephone conferencing still going on. And in Asia Pac, there's an awful lot of stuff done on the WeChat, WeMeet platform. So, and how do you integrate that and do that well?
We've got an initiative we're part of at the moment called the O-shaped lawyer. So lawyers, traditionally people talk about being a T, so, you know, the vertical line is sort of their in-depth legal skills. The horizontal bit is sort of, they had to be business development, debt, you know, collectors, you know, do all the rest of it, sales people, etc. Whereas you're now trying to make them more rounded, and it's sort of a client-led thing as well. So it's trying to make them business people and lawyers and some tech skills all wrapped into one. So it's, you know, it does what it says in the tin. But I believe that sort of client-led, a number of clients came together to push for this. So that's an interesting one for people to look at.
Yeah, absolutely. And how are you, David, how are you on the training side, which I think Tiggy was saying, you know, you kind of got your IT training, but clearly you've got your kind of process practice training. How are you tackling that in your circle of partners? So
yeah,
how do you?
I think it's difficult. It's just that collaboration, because I think we noticed a few years ago that for new starters, there was a bit of a gap. You know, we would show them how to work the IT system, you know, in IT training, the learning development team in HR would show them, you know, other business skills, etc. And then it was sort of left to their teams to hopefully show them the process for the team. So that is now a lot more joined up. We're partly because of this O-shaped lawyer thing, we now all work and we're clear as to whose job it is to deliver which part of it. So you get a more rounded, you know, skill delivery. Whereas before we just sort of, you know, there's the basic, you know, everyone can use, you know, a document management system 100 different ways, but how does your particular team use it? You know, that was the part that we were not great at. So we're trying to get standardization certainly across teams and on work types. So we're trying to sort of forget for us, we were quite regional. So London would be different from Manchester, different from Glasgow. We're now trying to get more national or international teams that all work in the same way. Why should you have every office with 7 different ways of doing things? In fact, again, without selling you guys, you helped us with our clinical risks and that. And I think the first thing Tiggy did was came forward and say, look, you've got 7 offices doing this work and 49 different ways of doing things. So perhaps if we standardize, people will get a consistent, your clients will get a consistent look and feel to your work across the piece. Let's take the best of each of it and make that a standard offering.
That's fine. Okay. Nathan, I saw you were about to chip in there as well.
Yeah, just the Oshape lawyer piece. So we're involved in that initiative, and so one of the things that we're doing, as I've talked about the consulting group, so we're creating secondments into the IT team, into that consulting group for our junior lawyers on a 6-month rotating seat.
Yeah.
And we're starting that process now to effectively jumpstart our junior lawyers in terms of understanding the capability of the technology that's out there. But not only for them as the individual, but the idea is to then release them back into the wild and allow them to then disseminate that information back into their legal teams.
Yeah. And what's the feedback been, in particular, I guess, from the lawyers when they go on placements? They all have, like, I don't know, they have ones that they want and ones that they don't want. Is it been an attractive option or less so?
We're right at the start of the process, so I'll let you know. But yeah, that's going to be the challenge, is how do we sell this not just to the lawyers? We need to demonstrate. So we've made sure that they're going to be aware that this will be factored into their assessments in terms of promotion in future if they engage with this program. But also in terms of for the teams and the partners, is how do we make sure that they don't have that there is no detriment for that 6-month period, and that's around looking at things like backfill if that's required, making sure we adjust their financial targets accordingly, because if you only got a team of 4 or 5, then taking one person out for 6 months is going to have a material impact. So we've tried to lay that groundwork, but I'll let you know how successful it is.
No, we'll be delighted. We'll be delighted to hear. And I think on paper, absolutely, it sounds like a great idea. And I think, with the whole movement to digital, the more you can create your lawyers to be O-shaped and have a really good understanding and promote and champion that, is be interesting to see what the appetite is and also the feedback on those 6 months placements as well. So we'll watch that space. The other question I had, and we touched on it earlier, was just around utilising what you currently have. And there's lots of requests coming in from the business and perhaps from clients for specific pieces of technology or kit. And how can you make sure that you use your current technology stack without, without stifling the enthusiasm of people within the firm, and making sure that people don't go off on complete tangents? So David, perhaps, I don't know if you're able to give a bit of insight to see how, to let us know how you're managing that utilization of your current stack and really optimizing. You talked about Microsoft before. So how do you make sure that you get the most out of that?
I would be honest, I don't think we've done well on that so far. I think we've probably been through 2 Microsoft licensing cycles where we've bought stuff we haven't used. So I really, at the moment, I'm putting my IT team and sort of writing it into their objectives and really saying, right, we need to get on top of this. There's so many tools out there, and we use Teams as Nathan does as well. And we had Skype, fortunately, before the pandemic, but we need to have a look at these tools and use them and sort of deploy them rapidly. But I think it is a bit of a mix and match. It's finding people in the business through various projects. We've got some sort of IT champions. I can't remember what we call them. Someone can remind me. But people that are sort of IT insiders, I think, almost, people that will trial things for us, utilizing those sort of people that will be friendly towards you. I think the training team come into it as well. And I think part of it is just allowing people to play, but in a safe way that doesn't spook your risk team. So we're trying to pull all that together, having a bit of a strategy, but also making it loose enough to allow some play, but also making sure the risk team are really involved from the outset so that we don't sort of, spook them. So for us, that's, but we certainly haven't licked it. So if Andrew and Nathan have, I'm all ears. But I think it's certainly for us, we need to get our finger out. We're moving Exchange Online, all these things, Teams, but I'm more interested in the things beyond that. And how we create this new, way of working and new, what we talk about is for our colleagues and clients, taking away the grit in the machine, just making things easier, having things at people's fingertips. So that's certainly part of our new strategy that's about to launch. Any other inputs on that from the panelists?
So I'll just add to that. I don't think we've licked it either, frankly. I don't think we do too bad a job. One of my biggest issues, though, is inappropriate technology use. And what we find is that we have people that go native. They adopt technology, and they basically want to leverage that technology more and more, rather than actually seeing it as one tool amongst many, and actually making an assessment at the start of a process to say, right, what are the right tools that we should be deploying here to attend to this problem. So that's a bit of an issue for me, is making sure that we actually go through an effective assessment process. And again, it all comes back to that consulting function, is that there's people with an understanding of the full breadth of the technology is available to us as a firm, who can bring that knowledge to the discussion, and then ensure that we're actually using the right technology to meet those requirements.
Yeah. Andrew, have you got any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'd sort of, yes, I mean, I agree with all the points made. I kind of break it up into two chunks. I mean, I think, getting the best out of what you've actually got. There's an awful lot of technology that is in use, which is underused. And so just that basic hygiene factor of building skills in the organization, it's not very exciting. It's definitely not glamorous, but it's really important. I think, getting more from some of the more powerful tool sets that are now available, some of the things that we've talked about earlier in the call, we're really focused on the data. If you want to build something and make use of it, you've got to have access to the data. It's got to be trusted. You've got to be using it in a trusted way as well. We're also very much focused on process. We're a devil for making beautifully complex process, and actually we realize that we need to sort of simplify a lot of that stuff. And back to data, in those processes, where do you capture and how do you capture the data that you need in order then to build some of the tools and workflows that you are identifying as sort of being important. And if you're empowering people to build workflows through some of the Power Apps, then they're going to need that stuff in order to do anything meaningful. Otherwise, you're going to end up with a world of little data silos where you can't trust the data, the process is questionable, and the outcome is probably not correct. So we're sort of having a look at those building blocks alongside, basic skills training and some of the products that we use as well.
Yeah, and I think that topic of data is really interesting, and we've seen it in our life. Many IT implementations, ultimately, if the bad data goes in, then the bad data comes out, and then people start questioning what technology you've got. Tiggy, I know some of the work we've done also recently has been around Office 365 and how that is used, and clearly there's OneDrive and Teams and SharePoints and collaboration, and there's links and there's ways in storing documents. Have you found that whole myriad of being able to access and collaborate has created data issues amongst our clients?
I think so. If we take the example of Teams and SharePoint, that can be quite confusing. So training people on how you want them to work, how you want them to store things, what are they allowed to use? So are they allowed to use Teams to collaborate on client documents or not? So just being very, very clear about the best ways of working for individual teams and getting that agreed by teams, I think is really important. In terms of data, I think there's GDPR, there's particular regulations that need to be satisfied, and actually I think it's about communication and training. So making sure that actually as people join teams, and people don't stay in the same role, so they move as well, just making sure that actually giving clear guidance and making sure that particularly teams understand retention guidelines is really critical. It's not sexy, but it's a really important part of actually making sure that you're not exposing yourself to operational risks. So I think again, it's trying to work out who is responsible for making sure that people are actually aware of the requirements and that they understand what they're obliged to do. And that's an ongoing thing. That's not a once a year job. Again, it's something that needs to be recommunicated continually, because it's not a habit for a lot of people.
IT and legal.
The data they're creating.
IT and legal, not sexy, Tiggy. This is outrageous slander.
Sorry. I'm going to segue into something even more sexy. We've got a question coming in around security. There we go. The topic of security. And I guess, ultimately, you are dealing with confidential data, so it's kind of across the board. How, within your kind of overall IT function, how are you seeing security, and how can you make sure you put enough resources in that to make sure you're secure and compliant, and that, you know, data is managed? I don't know. So it's free for all. Whoever wants to answer that one.
I'll take a stab. I mean, so there are different ways of organising the security function. The cybersecurity function now in Overy reports to me. In some firms, it reports to the general counsel, also the data compliance team. We work incredibly closely with the chief privacy officer, who's there to manage data compliance, data regulation. It's an area where we've put increasing investment in over the years. And, you know, we benefit from that double-edged sword, which is the client audit. You know, we work for all of the big banks. We're subject to audits every week of the year, except over Christmas. And actually, we learn an awful lot from that. You know, it's a pain to go through, but we're better for it, and they're better for it as well. And that's helped, you know, us come up the curve. It's an arms race, you know, and at the end of the day, you're investing as much as you can, you know, trying to stay ahead of the curve. But it's an area of constant focus. I mean, there isn't a day goes by where I'm not talking about it from one perspective or another.
And how do you manage that level of investment? Because with security, it's never enough, is it? Because you're protecting yourself against something that may or may not happen. Whereas, you know, you're rolling out another piece of tech, you know what the benefits are. How do you go about setting budgets and investment?
Yeah, I mean, we have governance structures that, you know, provide us with guidance as well. So we report both into the firm's risk committee, but also into the IT board as well. And the conversations that we're having about cybersecurity are framed through the lens of, you know, what's the impact, what's the probability of this thing occurring, and what are the mitigations needed to manage that, and are those mitigations going to be acceptable from a business perspective as well? So, you know, you're trying not to be tech-led at all. Actually, what you're doing is you're looking for where those elements of risk exist, quantifying them, looking for what the controls are going to be, and understanding if those controls will be palatable or not, and then you know, there's people around the table with a lot of experience of the running of the firm helping you get to the right, you know, the best possible judgment call on that stuff. And some of it's pretty straightforward, and some of it's really finely balanced.
Yeah. I don't know, David, Nathan, I don't know if you got any other, it is a hot topic, security.
I would reiterate, there is never enough money. You know, good practice apparently is 10% of budget. We're close to that, but of course it's probably the security companies saying that. I think get the basics right. Good patching, good monitoring, these types of things will be better than any, you know, foolproof system that's checking for this or that or the next thing. Concentrate on the human element as well. So, you know, we're not all got ginormous security teams. So if you get the basics right, just with a bit of infrastructure and your servers and things, you'll knock out a lot of it. And that's where a lot of it comes from. You know, obviously the more you can get, the better, but don't just invest in the technology, invest in people and training your people, and phishing attacks and that type of thing, physical, you know, attacks on buildings and things. So I would spread the love a little bit around that. But that would be my hints and tips.
We definitely do quite a bit on that awareness training. We're running regular phishing exercises against the firm, which aren't desperately popular, but they are effective. I think to your other point, David, the other thing that we do is we bring in people from outside of legal into the information security team. We do not hire in the legal industry for that. There are better sectors that are frankly better at this stuff than we are, and we benefit hugely from bringing that expertise into our organisation.
And communicate the risk, let people know. We're now starting to give people across the firm, you know, if there's something almost happens, we'll let them know and what it was and what it looked like as a real life. You know, this isn't something ripped from a headline and put old daily paper. This is last week in our business, that person there, this is what happened, to frighten people basically.
Yeah,
unfortunately.
We see quite a few firms also doing testing, so to see, and this is very much around the human aspect actually, you know, people coming in and trying to get onto their laptops or sending fraudulent emails to see kind of what the responses are going to be. Is that something that you've adopted and finding successful?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, we have sort of advanced penetration testing, which is essentially what that is. But I think ultimately it's about making sure you have a comprehensive framework, because all the things we've talked about here, if you don't attend to all of them to an appropriate extent, it's that will bite you. So if we don't train our people effectively, it's the fact that they will succumb to phishing attempts. If we don't put in place the appropriate technology, if we, even the basics of good firewalls, if we don't do that, that's how they'll get in. So it's making, there's no point in going to the nth degree on any one particular area, because that's not going to be your problem area. So it's making sure that you're appropriately attending to all of those areas, making sure you've got a risk log, making sure that you do use third-party consultants, as Andrew does, use your client audits to help inform improvements you can make. It's just, it's got to be comprehensive.
Okay, well, we'll move on from that sexy topic of security onto something different. Whilst I've got you there, Nathan, you mentioned kind of earlier as we were going through it, you were talking about legal project management. What form do you think that is going to take as you look into the future, and how do you put it in practice to get that project management discipline into the delivery?
Well, for me, it's a part of a much wider objective, which is to introduce multidisciplinary client service teams, where we recognize that we need multiple skills in order to be able to deliver a good service to the client. And that's covering all aspects from technology to finance, through to good project management, to core legal skills, administrative support, and so on. So for me, legal project management only forms part of that wider objective. But in terms of legal project management, look, the way in which we manage our legal matters, and I say the way we, in the broadest sense, across legal, all law firms, is pretty immature. I mean, it's pretty basic, and largely the tools that we're using are email and Word documents. And from our perspective as technologists, we know that's a horrific way to operate. And that's why we've for many years leveraged other tools to try and brought in specialist skills. If you ever tried getting a SQL expert to run a project, probably not the best use of those skills. So what we've done is introduce project management capabilities, business analyst skills, to make sure that we are delivering this piece of work within our technology functions well. That's exactly the same thing we have to do within our legal teams. We've got a lot of generalists. That's what our lawyers and PAs effectively are. And we've got a lot of generalists trying to deliver these legal work packages, i.e. matters. And we've got to recognize the fact that we've got to bring in those different skills. And I see absolutely legal project management as a core part of that, to ensure that, again, the overall delivery of the matter is being attended to, and that the key milestones are met, that a plan's put in place, that the budget is adhered to, and all of those sort of good things. And of course, I think we actually have an amazing pool of resources already that could help us do that, and that's our PA community. At the moment, they tend to be focused on very general skills, and actually what we should be doing is putting them on a pathway to development that leads to those sort of legal project management skills, because frankly some of them are already doing it, and they're doing it extremely well. We just don't call them legal project managers. And I can see that that's a great source of those kind of resources in future. We just need to recognize the need and then put in place a development plan for them to achieve those skills and to be able to leverage them.
Tiggy, she's got her hand up. She has.
I'm nodding. I totally agree with that. But I think the challenge is sometimes when you start talking about LPM, people say, "Oh, I've seen a brilliant tool. I've seen an amazing tool that I know will solve everything, the magic bullet." And actually, it's all about behaviors and practices. And then if you get really good at it, bring a tool on to help with that. So I think there's it's just setting an expectation that actually it's about ways of working and best practice. And then you can put technology, once you've got your processes sorted out and your ways of working, then you can put technology over the top of that. But if you haven't got those skills and that practice in place, putting a tool on top is not going to solve your issue. It's not going to fix your problem.
Right. Thank you. Any other thoughts on LPM and any nuggets that anyone can share how to get it right?
I think our experience, I mean, we have a legal project management function. I agree with Nathan. You know, we have a group which is about providing project management technology and other skills to support the practice groups. And we've been particularly successful in training, you know, lawyers to do that role. You know, lawyers that are stepping out of a particular career track because they have an intimate understanding of the subject matter that they're managing, and then you're rounding them out with, you know, methodologies and approaches to manage those things more effectively. And because they've got the vocabulary and the practice experience, you know, the partner in particular is sort of more engaged with that individual than they would be coming from, you know, a purely project management background. So I share that because we found that works fairly well.
Yeah, that's really helpful.
And I would just share, and it's more an observation of, you know, LPM or, you know, just use Excel or something, you know, it's really just a means to an end. There was the Canadian firm that merged with Rags, had a really good video I saw a few years ago, whereas, you know, legal, it's like, you know, you're stepping on a plane, you don't know the destination and you don't know how much it's going to cost. You know, it's a really unusual place to be. Clients want certainty. Am I going to get the outcome I want, and what is basically the rough cost of it? So, you know, the way we do that is perhaps, you know, thinking about the resources we'll use, thinking about how long it will take, thinking of planning some milestones and things. And we would probably on this call that project management or legal project management, but it's really just trying to figure those things out for them. So I think keep it simple, you know, and remember that's your end goal.
Good. I've got my questions are coming in thick and fast now, gents and ladies. I've got another question, which is we'll move from LPM onto communication. There's a few questions coming through around effective communication, and perhaps one of you could share what you found in particular in the last 12 months with remote working. What's been the most effective way of communicating with your teams?
For us, we've really, and not just myself, but we've as a firm really ramped up video communication. So we did our first ever town hall by video, and I know these are not new to particularly American companies. We've got another one I think next week, and everyone loved that. And just the whole, it's the first time some people felt like we're in a global or international firm. People were saying, "Oh, I'm in Santiago, I'm here, I'm there," whereas we just hadn't had that sort of feel before. I've also done a number of things with my team, doing similar things as well. So I think ramping up video, you know, and just makes it, you know, enabling people to sort of, you know, ask questions and interact. And again, that's a great enabler. Our managing partner and senior partner would have to have gone to 30 offices before, whereas they can communicate to the whole firm at once and communicate. And it's the same set of questions you're getting in almost every office. So actually makes it more efficient.
Yeah, does that work across the other firms as well? Is there any top tips that you're able to share in terms of communication and what's really worked well?
Absolutely, in terms of video. Again, so our UK managing partner does a Friday video call every week, and it's very different. I've heard about David's town hall sessions, very highly scripted, wonderful sort of TV
production
sort of
values.
yeah, absolutely, very professional. Whereas I don't know if many people know Ray Berg, our managing partner, is slightly unorthodox, and his videos follow suit. They're very informal, but that's gone down very well indeed, especially as people, you know, really are looking to stay connected. Whilst frankly, it's very hard to do that when we're all working remotely. So that's worked well. But again, the capabilities of Teams in terms of the social media features of the collaboration aspects of Teams, as we've also found, certainly within the IT team itself, incredibly valuable. The speed of communication when there's issues, which can then just immediately share that information across all our national businesses, has proved really beneficial.
You'll not be surprised to hear, Nathan, that my own team town halls are not quite as professional and not quite as polished as our senior partner and managing partner ones. But there you go.
Yeah, well, we've had the joy of seeing Andrew's dog. I don't know if anyone spotted the dog earlier. But
I saw his co-pilot there.
I know. Have you got any other tricks up your sleeve, Andrew, to engage?
No, I'd echo the video point. I mean, I think from a corporate communications perspective, probably the one that's been interesting has been a blog from the senior partner. where he's quite open about, what's going on in his family and his circumstances through the pandemic, and is also being used to weave in, messages about, you need to think about this or reflect on that, and particularly as we've sort of been building up to this return to office-based working over the last number of months, messages and sort of thoughts have been seeded into that, which sort of, if you can read the tea leaves, sort of tell you what firm's policy is going to be in that area. And that's been very well received. Thousands of people read that when it comes out, so because it's different. Yeah.
I would just pick up Andrew's point there. That is a really good point. I think the human element, we have really emphasized. Things are much more, hope you're all okay, hope you're people sharing their family story, whatever. So everything has been much more about you as an individual. How are you doing? We do teeth point talks. They're called once a month. I think I'm at the next one with my cat Haggis. He's a bit of a superstar in our Pets at DCB group. So a couple of us with pets are going to be there, and 50 people will join just for a chit chat, not any other particular thing than just getting together, because you miss that interaction. So we've been doing a huge amount of that as well, just more informal. How are you as a human being? No work chat whatsoever, type of thing.
Yeah. Good. I think that's really useful. Thank you. I've got another question coming through, and there's been quite a lot of discussion around it, particularly within IT, around really understanding the client needs and not just doing tech for tech's sake. How, as an IT function, do you identify client requirements and understand them and respond to that? So how do you actually get those requirements coming in? I don't know who would like to take that one.
So I'll pick up on that. So we've actually, many years ago now, it must be a good 7 or 8 years ago, we created our Osborne Clarke solutions function, which is very much dedicated to engaging with our legal teams and with our clients directly on understanding their needs and developing solutions to meet those needs. So we sort of recognize that, and I think it was mentioned earlier, that a lot of this change really comes from the client perspective. And so being able to leverage that as a way of actually changing the way in which we operate as well is incredibly helpful. So yeah, by creating that separate dedicated function, that's really helped us create that engagement.
Yeah, and it's getting that real insight, not the anecdotal stories. It's really making sure that if you're going to make an investment to do something different, that there's a real need for that. How are you finding that, Andrew? Are you doing similarly?
Yeah, we do similar things. I mean, pre-March, we would have clients in for a couple of days at a time, working with our I2 group, which is our innovation group, which is a blend of lawyers and technologists. We now do that virtually. That we use the business model Canvas framework for those discussions, and increasingly what we've seen in sort of what you describe as sort of legal operations consulting. So how corporates transform the efficiency of their own in-house legal teams. We're actually seconding people from our legal tech group onto client sites for 6 to 9 months at a time, and sort of taking the way that we do stuff and adapting it and helping them, make the changes that they want to make in their own functions. So, and then we're listening to that, obviously, and bringing that back in and sort of thinking about how that might apply to other organizations. So those would be 2 ways that we're doing it.
Yeah, fine. Okay. I got a message in from Vicky, which is around, I'm going to pop it over to David, because it ties in neatly with your kind of innovation themes as well, and talking about incremental changes. When you are implementing a technology piece, how do you know adoption has been successful?
I think there's lots of different ways you could measure, so there's some really good, if it was technical measuring you want, about transactions going through quicker, there's some really good tools these days like Eternity and others. You could survey, thinking of some of the stuff that you guys have done for us, looking at time and motion studies about how long did it take before, how long did it take afterwards. I'm thinking our CRM project. So we've dipped our toes in that, I think 3 times, and the first time I think on that, I'd be measuring how often in 3 months people log in. That could be a measure. Obviously it's not really a measure of success. You might measure how much cross-selling you believe you've done from it, how many cross matters that you've got. So I think it's just thinking creatively, but really trying to keep yourself honest on that. And again, as I mentioned before, Tiggy really helped us with that, because we were doing a lot, delivered a lot, but did it really make a damn set of difference? I think you do have to measure, particularly when this is real money you're spending to do things. So
I agree, David. I think the key thing is understanding what's the behaviour or what's the issue you're trying to fix in the first place, and then making sure you've got measures baked in. So, okay, well, what did the measures look like before we did this change, even if it's incremental, and then having measures to check that, but not just in the 2 weeks afterwards. You check it
6
in 3
months, a
months,
year,
in 6 months, and 9 months, and then you can modify what you need to do on the adoption front. So is it communicating? Is it having drop-in sessions? Is it retraining? What are the things that you're learning from the measures that you've taken, and also asking people. I think doing pulse surveys and checking if it's useful and what are the frictions, and rechecking that.
And the real estate stuff you did for us, Tiggy, I think it was we knew how much data we're collecting beforehand, and it wasn't great. We knew how much data we're collecting afterwards, so that was a massive increase in quality. I think we tracked it was the same number of people, but they were managing to do more. It was, I think in this case it was plot sales or something, so managing to do more with less, or more with the same, if you like. So the revenue went up, I think, by £1 million. So there was some real good measurements we managed to use.
And I think it's baking it in from the start, as you're saying. So sometimes projects start and then you start to measure, but if you've got no baseline measure, then you never know how you're.
What's the problem? What you're trying to solve? Back to sort of the square root.
We make it sound so simple, don't we? Right, I've got a couple of more questions, and then we'll wrap up. One of them is about the biggest challenges, and one about the biggest opportunities. So I think we'll finish on opportunities. So I'd be really keen to see what you see the biggest challenges within IT are going to be over the next 12 months. Shall we start with Nathan? We haven't heard from him, so we'll rotate them.
So I think security is going to be a continual challenge. I think that's just going to increase in terms of the threat vectors. That's not going to get any easier. I think obviously the wider market. I think that's another area of challenge where we're seeing the new providers, the law companies that are starting to challenge the kind of services we're providing. Our clients themselves, they're starting to, the nature of the in-house functions are changing as well with the sort of growth of legal operations. A lot of the work that we rely upon in terms of volume work, especially to sort of lead to much more high value work, that will be much harder for us to retain. And so we've got to start thinking about how do we still retain the high value work when we don't have that lead in from that volume work.
Okay,
sorry, and the final thing, final thing is just the very structure of law firms, and the partnership model itself. The fact that we empty the coffers at the end of every year to distribute profits to the partners, and hopefully in many cases in some law firms to the employees as well. So how do you sustain a long-term investment strategy in technology and delivering on the digitalization and the transformation that should afford? How do you do that within that model?
The right levels of investment. Okay, we've picked on quite a few things there. Is there, without, I guess, repeating Nathan, is there any, between David and Andrew, is there any other key challenges that you see within your firms, in addition to what's just mentioned?
I think, I mean, in the 7 years I've been here, I remember going to conferences and you'd have a lot of esteemed people from many esteemed fellow firms. What's your key differentiator? We have the best lawyers. And after about hearing this 18 times, I thought, well, hold on, they're all saying this. And I think there is a little bit of a big drive at the moment that, if you've got decent lawyers, you can do the lawyering really well. It's what happens with the matter set up, the touch points, the communication, the billing, the whole cradle to grave. If you can be good at that, and the data that Andrew mentioned as well, so it's not just about doing the 10 matters, it's providing the data and the certainty of cost, and everything around the legal part. If you've got the legal part licked, then it becomes how do you differentiate yourself with everything else? So I think there's great opportunities, but great danger there for those that don't get that right. And as Nathan said, it ties into the more and more work going in-house. When you look at the growth of in-house lawyers in the last 10 years, it has been an astronomical.
And clients are becoming more fickle as well. It's easier to swap and mix and change. So it's a tricky environment. Andrew, is there any other things that you'd like to add to that?
No, I think those points cover it.
They cover it. There's plenty there. There's plenty there to work with. We don't need more challenges. So I'll stick with you then, Andrew. So let's finish up on our last question. And this question's come through pretty much from everyone. Everyone's really keen to find out what kind of what your hot tips are. So what are we looking out for in terms of system and tech? What do you think law firms are going to be adopting over the next 18 months, say?
It's gonna sound like Nathan and I scripted this before the call. So I would say for us, it's the rise of Microsoft. I would, sort of put it a bit more widely than just Teams. Why do I think that? I think because it will force us to confront, the hodgepodge of vendors that work in the legal space and really question the value that they're providing, because of the tool sets that Microsoft now have enable you to replicate that and do it better. And we sort of see that through the lens of providing a business to consumer experience for our lawyers, their home experience in IT, as opposed to something which at the moment, let's be frank, is pretty sketchy in places. If you're in the world of time capture and metadata stripping, it's not a glamorous place to be from a user experience. So we think the rise of Microsoft over the next period is critical. The deployment of Teams and the integration of your document management system within Teams, so you can effectively manage information barriers and manage your working practices and not end up with 10,000 data silos, because you'll blow the business up if you do that. We see as being a big enabler. And a couple of people have touched on it earlier on in the call. These new technologies are empowering. So actually, Power Apps, apps in the App Store from Microsoft, that allows people to build the solutions that they need in order to fix their business problems, but within the guardrails that you set from an architectural and cybersecurity perspective. So I think, that sounds like a plug for Microsoft. I collect my check at the end of the call, but that would be our view for the next period.
Fine. I know, Nathan, you agree with that because we've already picked up on that. Is there anything else over and on top, kind of the rise in Microsoft that you're predicting or are you expecting to get firms to invest in?
And I will put a caveat around that because there are challenges around that rise in Microsoft, and we've got to mitigate against that, but we're not talking about the challenges now. I think to Andrew's point around the data, traditionally our data sits within Word documents. It's entirely unstructured or emails. A terrible place for it to be. If we can move that into databases, then we can start providing our clients with much greater insight into what's going on within their businesses, frankly, and start delivering entirely new services, which means the opportunity to generate more revenue. And also traditionally, and this hasn't changed as much as I would have liked in the last 25 or so years, is what we deliver is really good. We do deliver a good service as a profession, as an industry to our clients. How we do it isn't, and that's the opportunity, and always has been. There is so much that we can go after in terms of improving the way in which we go and deliver the way in which we deliver our services, which will improve in terms of efficiencies, will improve the output. So that for me continues to be a wonderful opportunity for all law firms. I don't think any law firm's got anywhere close to looking at.
I know. I think he's stolen your thunder there, David. So you've talked already as well about the kind of how you're delivering it. It's not the lawyering, it's the whole package. We talked about Microsoft. Are there any other tips that you or any other insights that you can add to that?
I would just come back to one of the points we all made earlier and make it much wider than just the tech itself. And I think it's this genuine moment of change. When I joined legal, a lot of people are saying the pace of change has never been quicker. As I sat on that glacier and it moved 2 microns per year, and in the last year, we went last year, 2 years ago, we rolled out e-signatures here. Half the firm took it, the other half said, no, thank you, not for us, darling. We are far too important. 3 days into the pandemic, grabbing it, like with both hands. We rolled that system out to 1,500 users, including training, I think in 6 working days. And I had several outraged people telling me that was far too long and it should have been rolled out much quicker. That's the type of people I want to be working with, that want change and want it to do things quickly. And that's what we should not lose, in the next year. That momentum that we've built, the people are now more open because of all this than they were before.
And it is a super exciting time if you look ahead and what's coming and you look at the changes that have been delivered and the potential for what's to come. Tiggy, do you want to, I can give you 1 more minute and then we'll wrap up. Is there any final words you would like to add to where you see things are heading?
Well, I totally agree with everything that's already been said. I suppose the other area, and we have touched on it a bit, is just about providing visibility. So what, where are we in a matter? Does the client understand that? Have we set expectations correctly? And I think there's a lot more that we could do there. So actually providing visibility for teams and for clients, like you get everywhere else, like you get in banking, like you get, in any kind of retail environment. You can see what's happening. You can see if your order's been shipped. You can see if your mortgage is about to complete. And we need to get to that level of visibility and transparency. And when we do, then hopefully then clients will feel really like, their experience matches some of the experiences they have in other sectors, where it's really easy to understand what's happening, and how much something costs and when it's going to be delivered.
Someone's going to mention Amazon, aren't they?
There you go. So there's a partnership in the making, I think. So perfect. On that note, we will round up. I just want to say a big thank you for everyone who has joined us today. A very, very big thank you to our panelists. We've got some amazing insight into the role of IT, what's up and coming, the key challenges. We've even talked about kitchen cupboards, which I enjoyed as well. So that was all important. We will be sharing the key points, so keep an eye out for that for those of you who've attended. So some of the key themes that are coming out, and we will be sharing that, and it will be made available on our website. So thank you all, and I hope you have a great rest of the day.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
Enjoy the day. Bye-bye.
Thanks.